Hello. Hello, so hopefully everyone can hear me. So I apologize firstly to everyone who... I tried to stream earlier today and it didn't go too well because this idea that I had for the stream, I completely didn't realize that I actually needed to do some preparation beforehand. So it didn't work out too well. So I had dinner and I'm back and I've actually done the preparation I need to do. So here we are. Today we're doing the ultimate Skyrim tier list. We're going to be ranking every single quest in, or not every single one, but all the main quests in Skyrim, as in not just from the main quest, but rather all the major missions. And the reason I'm doing this on stream is because I'm going to make a video out of this, and I thought it would be more interesting if I did it with some input from you guys, from people watching. So I thought that so this is an opportunity, if you guys are interested, of being in a video. So I'm going to be talking to you guys about, which quests I think are best, or which ones are the worst. And all these pictures here represent different quests, and I've got a list of quests that I want to consider. Some that are notoriously bad, and others that are better. So just bear with me. I'm just setting up some audio stuff to record the video. So that's recording. There we go. Okay. I'll mute the mic for that. There we go. Okay, so 3, 2, 1. Okay, so now it's recording. So yeah, this is your opportunity to be part of a video if you come up with good suggestions and stuff like that. But we are going to be ranking the quests in Skyrim. And as you can see, I've got 5 tiers here. We've got the Talos tier, the pretty good tier, the adequate tier, the poor tier, and as annoying as the annoying fan tier, the worst of the worst. So the first quest we have is gonna be one that I think is gonna go straight to the bottom, and that is if I just trying to find the name, what's it called? And that is a return to your roots. So we've got the Nern route here, and I'm gonna put this on the bottom tier, and I think you guys are gonna basically unanimously agree with me, because you just have to go across Skyrim collecting just fuckloads of plants, and it's just so tedious. It's by far one of the most tedious quests in the entire game. And the thing is about Nern roots is there's this theme across the Elder Scrolls games, where in Oblivion as well, there's a really boring quest line surrounding Nern roots, basically. And this quest basically is just you collect 30 Nern roots and then return them to this particular mage. I've forgotten his name. So yeah, it's going at the bottom. A Lydia. So John Leonard, I feel like there should be a Lydia tier, not the most desired, but easy to get. I feel like those would be like fetch quests, which I don't think I've got too many included in this video. But I'm gonna put the Nern root quest at the bottom. Also, I'm drinking this hot chocolate that I made, and I think I put way too much in it. It's the most what's the opposite of viscous? The most kind of congealed hot chocolate ever. It's almost a solid. It is just so... Oh my... It's just, yeah. It's not... I mean, it tastes nice, but the consistency isn't nice. But that's besides the point. So the next one we're going to consider is... I've got Brynjolf here. You might not be able to see it. It's quite small. Picture of Brynjolf, and it's going to be the Thieves Guild questline as a whole. So as a whole, what do we think about the Thieves Guild questline? I kind of think that... I mean, the Thieves Guild... What I would say is I think it's one of the more interesting quest lines, and one of the things that Skyrim actually does not too badly is and I think this is in large thanks to the creation engine, is stealth and stealing. The thing about Skyrim, but not just Skyrim, but most of Bethesda's games, is your ability to interact with the world. Is their engine allows for you to do that in such a sophisticated way that very few other games developers have managed to do. That's one of the best things going about Bethesda games. They've managed to create an engine that allows you to really interact with the world, which means that something like the Thieves Guild in Skyrim and Elder Scrolls games more generally tends to work quite well. And so by virtue of the fact of the kind of the game's mechanics behind it and the challenge of stealth, the Thieves Guild questline is generally quite good. But from a logical perspective, although arguably, I mean, it's Skyrim, you shouldn't be treating it with too much rationality, but from a logical perspective, there's a lot about the Thieves Guild questline that really doesn't make sense. Like the fact that it is basically like a light version of the Dark Brotherhood and you can just kill people. Someone's also pointed out the beginning quest is really, really annoying. When Brynjolf comes up to you and asks you about your wealth. And the thing is, it doesn't matter whether you fail that or whether you pass that quest, whether you manage to steal the ring or not, because either way you get recruited. So there's a sense to which there's not a lot of weight behind the Thieves Guild because anyone can get in, firstly, and secondly, on most of the missions, if I remember correctly, you can just kill people with impunity. There's no emphasis on actually not killing people, and you won't get expelled if you do, I think. So there's that. So there's a lot of kind of illogicality behind the Thieves Guild. I do like the whole thing with Mercer Frey. You know, he ends up betraying the Thieves Guild. You know, it's kind of interesting. It's not the most sophisticated plot ever, but there's worse. So for me, Thieves Guild is going to be firmly adequate. It's going to be adequate tier. But I prefer the Thieves Guild in Oblivion because in Oblivion, so. In Oblivion, you have to seek out the Thieves Guild. They don't come to you, whereas in Skyrim, they just come up to you. And I think in part that's just to make the game more accessible. And they kind of want players to try everything. But the issue is, it kind of defeats the purpose of a role-playing game. Because if you want to play as a thief, then it makes sense. You know, the Thieves Guild wouldn't just come up to you and recruit anyone to join, because you could just rat them out instantly. So from a role-playing perspective, the Thieves Guild in Skyrim doesn't really make much sense, and the Oblivion one is way better because you actually have to seek it out in order to join. But generally, I think it's not one of the worst quest lines in the game. Mirkwood saying though, no, put it lower. You get nothing when you complete the ending. That's true. I mean, compared to the Dark Brotherhood, you get so much money. So I can see either way. I mean, I'm more tempted to put adequate purely because I think that sums up the Thieves Guild quite well. It is adequate. It's not amazing. Doesn't make much sense. But I think the utilization of game mechanics and the stealth means that I think it's adequate. I think it's okay. They could have been better, but especially compared to Oblivion's Thieves Guild. But it's okay, I think. I've got 2 pictures of Brynjolf's, which is not good. That was a mistake. So talking about guilds, let's do the Dark Brotherhood next. So we've got the Dark Brotherhood hand here. I'm going to put it... I'm either thinking... sorry about that. I'm either thinking adequate or pretty good, to be honest. I'll put it in adequate for now. I'll maybe move it. But my reasoning behind that... Oh, I can see some people are still talking about the Thieves Guild questline, so I'll just go through some of these comments. A lot of people are saying poor, some people are saying average. The skeleton key, someone raises the point of the skeleton key. That's true, it doesn't make sense. There's not really an incentive to complete the Thieves Guild questline because the skeleton key... Yeah, someone's pointed out I have 2 pictures for all of them. I don't know why that is. That's a mistake, so I apologise for that. But the skeleton key you get at some point in the quest line, and it's so OP that it's not even worth completing it because it's worth more than anything that any money that you get completing the quest line. So that's not really, it's kind of self-defeating. But yeah, in terms of the Dark Brotherhood, I have certain reservations about the Dark Brotherhood lore-wise. I mean, the whole thing about... So firstly, I take serious issue with the fact that apparently they fulfill contracts on the basis of hearsay, because what Astrid says is that when someone performs a black sacrament, they eventually hear about it through rumours. But that just seems the jankiest way ever to collect information about contracts, and it's just so unbelievable, because who's really going to be doing it in public? So the whole black sacrament thing and how Astrid manages to accrue contracts just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I don't like that. The quest line itself and the storyline is questionable. Someone makes the point that it starts off good and gets worse. I think that's kind of true. I mean, the missions are generally interesting. And I like the whole fact that Astrid she conflates herself with the Dark Brotherhood, and there's a bit of an ego trip. But I just don't... It's not amazing. I just can't... The Dark Brotherhood questline is not amazing. It's not... Because there are some amazing quests in this game. We will put some quests at the Talos tier and the pretty good tier. But the Dark Brotherhood questline isn't one of them. If I was to compare the Thieves Guild and the Dark Brotherhood, I prefer the Dark Brotherhood. But as you might know, I've said before, I think Astrid's a bit of an idiot. There's a lot of idiocy behind some of the decisions that are made in the Dark Brotherhood, like allying with the Penitus Oculatus and things like that. It just really doesn't make sense. Wilhelm saying... Astrid doesn't care about the listener. There's no way for them to do it anyway. I presume you mean collect contracts. The Dark Brotherhood in the beginning is way too weak and needs direction. That's true. I mean, the whole reasoning, Astrid's reasoning behind disliking the listener, the player, just makes no sense whatsoever as well. Because Astrid's whole character is just that she is insufferable. She's not multi-dimensional. It is just she's supposed to be insufferable. She is the antagonist. She doesn't like the protagonist. It's kind of predictable. So I think I'm gonna leave Dark Brotherhood in the adequate tier. That's my personal vote. So I've got the DLCs on here as well. So I've got the Dawnguard DLC and the Dragonborn DLC, and I know that encompasses a lot, but going sort of holistically on the main quests or holistically, but also, most on the basis the main quests for these expansions. Dragonborn, I personally quite liked, and maybe nostalgia has something to do with that, because I played Dragonborn before I played Dawnguard when I was about 13, 14, and I loved the vibe at Solstheim. I loved how dour it was. I hadn't played Morrowind by that point, and so it's my first experience of kind of the Dunmer. And I really liked the aesthetic. I liked the locations. I got immersed in it. In terms of the storyline, it's also low-key got one of the most scary storylines in the game. I was terrified when I was exploring Hermaeus Mora's realm, and I found it really interesting that there was this kind of foil for the main character, this kind of evil Dragonborn, and I thought it added a certain level of depth to the concept of the Dragonborn. Dragonborns aren't wholly good, and so I liked that aspect, and I liked the dynamic between. And I'll read your comments in a second. I'm just gonna finish saying what I want to say. I liked the dynamic between Miraak and Hermaeus Mora, and that Miraak was kind of he wasn't his servant. He was a beneficiary of Hermaeus Mora, but was kind of insubordinate, rebellious. And I found that really interesting. And also they were just good characters. There's is it Tavos? Oh, I've forgotten his name, but the guy in the in Tel Mithryn, what is his name? And Neloth, sorry. I liked Neloth as well. But I'm going to read some of your comments now. Yeah, the Mead Hall thing was fun. I'm actually including the Mead Hall quest in this. We'll get to that later. Yeah, so I think the consensus is that the Dragonborn DLC was quite good, so I'm glad you guys share that opinion. Yeah, the Dragonborn DLC for me is it's simply, it's a standalone DLC, and you really do feel like it's got its own character. It really adds something unique to Skyrim, and it enhances the experience. And I think that's the measure of a good DLC. If it doesn't, it's not just more of the same. It changes the dynamic, story-wise, lore-wise, but also gameplay-wise, adding things like dragon riding. So the Dragonborn DLC for me is pretty good. I would say I thought Dawnguard. So where's the Dawnguard symbol? Dawnguard's here. Dawnguard for me, I'll leave it pretty good for the minute, but I might move it. Dawnguard for me was good. The storyline was interesting. The adding the vampirism was really interesting. Some of the new NPC interactions in the world made it a lot more lively. But it wasn't as grand a scale as Dragonborn. Firstly, it didn't add as much to the game. And secondly, some of the story itself, pardon me, sorry, it's my hot chocolate. The story itself, the story's good. It's not awful, and it definitely adds some background to the former, who are kind of some of the most enigmatic beings in Skyrim, for sure. But I just didn't feel as emotionally invested in the Dawnguard DLC. I liked the fact you could choose whether to be a member of the Dawnguard or a vampire, although ultimately you're kind of pigeonholed into facing Harkon either way. But in terms of kind of nuance, the Dragonborn DLC did something sort of more special because it kind of made you question the nature of what it means to be a Dragonborn, whereas in the Dawnguard DLC, it is just another unambiguously evil villain that you're facing. Whereas the Dragonborn DLC raises a few kind of, I think, important questions about what it means to be a Dragonborn. And I liked that. And so for me, they're both good DLCs. But Dawnguard for me, it lacked that kind of oomph. Really. And also the fact that your choice of which faction to join is almost somewhat superficial, because you end up in the same situation at the end anyway. There's only one ending, really. So that's something I didn't like about the Dawnguard DLC. Merc was saying he despised the Forgotten Vale. Yeah, it's just so almost tedious is the way to describe it. And I think that's the thing with the Dawnguard DLC, is some of the quests are a bit tedious. The Soul Cairn's interesting, but I got lost in there so much. So yeah, I think tedious is maybe the way to describe it. Serana, though, someone makes the point of Serana, true Nida, so cool, says Dawnguard's good only because Serana is an interesting character. Yeah, I think that's one of the best things about Dawnguard is Serana. And it's partly because of Serana that really, if there was a tier between pretty good and adequate, I would put it there. But for the minute, I'm going to put Dawnguard in pretty good. But I think that Dragonborn is better. That's my personal vote. But we'll move on. So the next one that I have, I'm going for the major ones first, and we'll get to the smaller quests later. So the next quest line that I've got here is the Companions one. So represented by this Jorvaska image here. Now for me, this exists somewhere between adequate and poor. I'll put it in adequate for now and maybe move it. Adequate, for me, adequate kind of sums it up because it's interesting. The dynamic of the werewolves and that sort of twist is interesting. And it definitely makes it more interesting than, say, from what I remember of the Fighters Guild in Oblivion, which maybe I'm misremembering, but there's no kind of twist, there's no sort of nuance. You are literally just the members of the Fighters Guild. Whereas the whole werewolf thing with the companions and the kind of morality surrounding that I found fascinating. And there is that really cool kind of, I suppose, moral dilemma at the heart of the companions. But the inverse is that most of the missions are pretty bland. I mean, you're just beating people up, you're attacking people, you're raiding dungeons. It's not that there's no. It just feels like monotonous, basically, and it's one of the least interesting guilds to be a part of, especially when you compare it to the Dark Brotherhood or the Thieves Guild. A lot of people are saying that it's pretty mediocre. The quest and storyline are boring and forgettable, says Ocean. Joker Dar says that it goes too quickly, and I think I agree with most of that. I think the Companions is mildly interesting, a good introduction to Skyrim maybe, but there's not a lot to it, really. A lot of hate for the Silver Hand as well in the chat, which I completely understand. It's almost like they just saw the Companions as a vessel. They were kind of like, how can we introduce lycanthropy to the game? Oh, let's shove it into the Companions. How can we introduce it to the player? Oh, Companions. That seems the way they've done it. So there was the potential for a lot more lore behind the Companions. You know, we learned nothing about, I suppose, their kind of legal status, because what separates them from just bandits or mercenaries? You know, why are they so esteemed in Skyrim? And that's not a question that's ever really answered in any way. So I think poor, although towards the upper end of poor. I would say the Companions isn't like awful, but it's like, if we're having the Dark Brotherhood and the Thieves Guild is adequate, then in relation to that, the Companions is poor. I think that the logic follows. Okay, which questline next? Okay, if we're doing the guilds, College of Winterhold. College of Winterhold, I'm tempted to put inadequate. Well, it depends. It depends how you view it. If you view it from the perspective of what the College of Winterhold should have been and what it could have been, I would put it at the bottom, potentially, because I think they really, really bastardized what could have been a really unique and interesting quest line. I mean, let's face it, you're not a student in the College of Winterhold at all. You do, like, you go on one excursion and instantly you have one lesson, one excursion, and then you're launched and you're the protagonist in this massive sort of existential main quest. You're not immersed as a kind of student at all. And if you compare that to the Mages Guild in Oblivion and Morrowind, where you're going to have to work up the ranks and you're a nobody, it pales in comparison. So I think really poor execution. But the quest line itself, ignoring the I would say the main drawbacks of the College of Winterhold is the fact the role playing is so poor because they didn't execute it very well. But the questline itself is quite interesting, although you can kind of see from a mile away that Ancano is like the main antagonist, and there's some very kind of stupid decisions made by people up the hierarchy, including the Archmage. I liked discovering the background of the Archmage, going to Labyrinthium. Labyrinthian is one of the best missions in the game, and so in many ways the College of Winterhold is a kind of quest line of contrasts. There are some highs, but there's definitely some lows. Yes, I mean, someone points out you basically become the Archmage after 5 quests. So it just kind of, it's so, you know, it's called a role-playing game, and it's not a role-playing game at all. Joker's saying, I think it's poor. There's no surprises, no excitement. So he says it's in the poor category. A lot of people saying it had a lot of potential, and I think that sums it up. College of Winterhold, I think, isn't necessarily objectively worse. Okay, I think this is my 2 cents. The College of Winterhold questline isn't necessarily worse than the Dark Brotherhood questline or the Thieves Guild questline. But the expectations that you have of a magical institution and what being a part of that will involve versus reality means I can't help but feel like it must be in poor, because those expectations simply aren't met. Now, I think we've got one final guild picture on here, one final guild to consider, and that is, of course, the Bard's College, which is, there's no dispute, that goes at the bottom. There's no disputing that. You don't even become a bard, you just fetch people's instruments from caves, and it's atrocious. It's got like 2 quests in it. It's if you have low expectations for the College of Winterhold and you're disappointed, then, and you're still disappointed, then you'll be 10 times more disappointed. Even if you have the lowest expectations of what you think the Bard's College will be, you'll still be disappointed for sure. Someone's saying Talos tier, of course, yeah. But yeah, I think it goes at the bottom easily. And another quest that goes at the bottom with no contest whatsoever is the No Stone Unturned, the Baron's Eye stones, when you have to find 30, 40 of them that are scattered across Skyrim. It's the most tedious thing, and I feel really sorry for, well, I don't actually. I mean, it would have taken an intern 30 minutes to make the Stones of Baron's Eye quest, and that's what it feels like, basically. Kaiserman, thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much, that's so kind. But yeah, no, thanks for watching, I really appreciate it, and stick around if you want, and if not, then gute Nacht if you're going to bed. So yeah, Stones of Baron's Eye goes at the bottom for sure. It's just tedious, boring. An intern probably made it in half an hour. That's how I'd summarize it. Let's go for one that's a bit more ambiguous. Okay, so the Murder Mystery quest. I'll put that in adequate for now, but move it around. So this quest is the one where you have to find the murderer in Windhelm. I'm just going to get up the wiki page so I don't say the wrong things, just remind myself of it. So it's when you first visit Windhelm, and a few citizens and guards mention there's a serial killer on the loose, and you go to investigate. You investigate who the killer is after the 3rd killing, and you basically end up finding out that it is Calixto Corium. Sorry, I'm just, because I haven't played this in a while, so I'm just reminding myself of it. And he's the serial killer. So everyone's saying that it's the most broken quest in the game. Not very glitchy. The quest markers are so bad. Dumbed down version of the house quest in Oblivion. Oh yeah, I mean that Oblivion quest is amazing. The one where you have to murder everyone in the house. That's one of the best quests ever. So maybe the concept's good, but the execution's poor. Maybe that's a good way to sum up this quest. Blood on the Ice. So yeah, I think Blood on the Ice, for me, is interesting concept. Murder mysteries are almost always quite good. You know, it's quite difficult to fuck up a murder mystery. I don't really think that they did in terms of the story, but they did maybe in terms of on a technical level. The quest is difficult to play. And it's difficult to finish, so I appreciate that. So on that basis, I think I'll leave it, because it's not quite adequate if it's kind of broken, so maybe poor. People are also pointing out that it's kind of impossible to fail it, which means that you're not too invested, and that's true as well. So let's keep that in the poor category. Okay, I'm interested to see what people think about this one. Meridia's Beacon. What about that quest? The quest where you fetch Meridia, her beacon, and then return it. The Break of Dawn, it's called. You find the beacon, replace it, and then you purge the temple, basically. So what do you think about the Break of Dawn? We're not considering the meme potential here.
Beacon touches the beacon. A new hand touches the beacon.
I thought it was just worth playing that because that is so annoying as well. A lot of people are saying it's not as bad as it's made out to be. The way you start it is annoying. Yeah, that's true. Another Nord dungeon crawl is what Jalal Mustafayev says. Her speech is annoying after the third time. Prucon says it's adequate, it can be hard when you're low level, but the Dawnbreaker and the loot you find is pretty decent. That's one thing I would say. I think the Dawnbreaker sword is really unique. And it's almost like one of those weapons that you want to continue using even after it's not, you've let your higher level, you exceed its potential, and you can get a better weapon because it just looks so cool. So it's a kind of a glorified fetch quest, I suppose. A glorified fetch quest, but with a cool sword, cool voice actor, but it does also start in an annoying way. So I think adequate is a good place for that to be. So next we've got Boethia's Calling. So Boethia's Calling is the quest where you have to bring a follower and sacrifice them to Boethia, and after that you go to a dungeon and kill her champion and get his ebony mail. And I think that for me, this is almost the kind of, this is one of the better Daedric quests because it's very interesting because it's asking you to sacrifice someone who's a potential follower. And I really liked that. That was the Daedric quests in general in Elder Scrolls games tend to be some of the best ones because they ask you to break all the kind of moral boundaries that you might have, and they just tend to be interesting. But on the other hand, there's nothing particularly exceptional about Boethia's Calling apart from that. It's hard. It's another kind of, you're going through a dungeon and killing someone sort of ordeal. There's nothing really that unique about it. And there's no kind of nuance either. There's not a case to be made for actually ethically joining Boethia. You know, with some Daedric lords like Meridia, Azura, there's a case to be made for worshipping. There is not a case to be made for worshipping Boethia. You're just evil. So I think mid adequate. So I'm gonna. Some people are saying poor, but I think adequate on the basis that I liked the dynamic of having to sacrifice one of your followers. I thought that was interesting. So I'm going to keep it adequate, and I think that's the kind of consensus as well. It'd be way better, as Lorenzo says, if you could actually sacrifice Nazim, but unfortunately. So the next quest that we have, we're going to go for another Daedric one, is the Vermina quest, where you is it Dark Caller Temple? I forgot the name of the temple, but you're dealing with the miasma, and you're working with Arandor to deal with the staff of Vermina, because it's been giving the people of what's the city? It's called Waking Nightmare, and it's giving the people of Dawnstar basically nightmares, and so you've got to deal with that. And there's an option at the end, and that's one of the good aspects of this quest. There's the option of either helping Arandor to destroy the staff, or of betraying him, killing him, and taking the staff. And one of the reasons that's good is that it enhances the role-playing experience so much, because if you're going for an evil character, you can make a definitively evil choice here. I think it's a good quest. I on the basis that I think the whole concept of you're working with Arandor, who's kind of like this anti-hero, formerly a worshipper of Vermina, but he's kind of turned his life around and is working for the Aedra now. I find that really interesting, and the fact his kind of backstory is slowly revealed to you throughout the quest, I think is fascinating. I like that aspect. The concept of the miasma is really interesting as well, and the fact you're kind of fighting these beings who are, these orcs and these the kind of devotees of Vermina who've been in slumber for so long. It's really in the midst of this kind of 60-year-old battle. I think is really interesting as well. And the dungeon is just one of the most interesting dungeons in the game, and I feel like a lot of thought was put into it. And the way it starts as well, it's so mysterious. You arrive in Dawnstar, and you're told, people are having these horrible nightmares, and there's a real sense of mystery. So I think it's a pretty good quest. Not Talos tier. I'm thinking now. At the minute, I'm not sure if any of these. Maybe we'll find something to put in the Talos tier, but at the minute, I'm not too sure. But for me, Vermina's quest is pretty good. Maybe verging on the Talos tier, the best tier. But at the minute, I'll leave it pretty good. Next, we have the Wolf Queen quest. The Wolf Queen Awakens, I believe. And to remind you guys, in this quest, which is based in Solitude, you basically hear about some troubles in a cave west of Solitude. And you delve in and you find there's a bunch of necromancers trying to revive Potima, who's this kind of witch queen, as you will. And if she comes back, she's gonna try and enslave the world, basically. And she was a former queen of Solitude. I think on the basis that this quest was so surprising, you go into it not expecting anything, and it becomes this kind of epic quest where you're low-key kind of saving the world, saving Skyrim. It's just, the dungeon is so cool, the concept's cool, the animations are cool when they're trying to revive her. It's on the whole, it is, I think, a really good quest, and also very unexpected. Everyone seems to agree with me. Everyone seems to be saying top tier. So we're going to put this in Talos tier at the minute. That's just, for me, that quest is at the bottom of Talos tier. It's kind of, better than these quests, but it's, I think for me, the reason that I've put the Wolf Queen Awakens in Talos tier is because it's so unexpected. You do not expect this grand quest of epic proportions where you're saving the world. The beginnings are so humble. You kind of hear about it in a court, you go to check out a cave, and that's it. And it becomes this really fantastic, interesting quest. And the lore behind Potima is so interesting. Because, she's a really controversial figure, to put it lightly. And so I think finding out about who Potima is and what she stands for is part of the quest's, part of the reason why it's so good. And you really do feel like you're battling evil, because it's just you know, no one else is acting on this. And you're in that cave, and you've got to deal with Patima and the people trying to summon her. And she is basically unambiguously evil. So, I don't know, there feels like there's so much weight to it, which you don't expect. So I'm putting that at the bottom of Talos tier at the minute. Okay, what's the next one? Okay, so if you can't tell from the picture, the next quest is the Forsworn Conspiracy in Markarth. So it's the quest where you enter Markarth, you see someone be murdered, and then you are imbued in this whole sort of coup from within the city, this attempt to overthrow the Nord overlords by the Reachmen. My personal opinion is that this is Talos tier. This is one of the best quests in the game, because there's so much moral ambiguity. You've got to really delve into the history of Markarth and the Reach to understand. I mean, what the quest is asking you to do is to understand both sides, to understand why the Nords feel the entitlement they do to rule now that they live in the Reach, and it's asking you to understand the politics and the sensibilities of the Reachmen as well. And that complexity is not found really in any other quest in this game. And that's what makes it Talos tier. For me. On a gameplay level, some people are saying that the prison part is quite bad. The thing about the prison thing is maybe it's not particularly well executed, but it is unique. You can't deny that it's quite a unique level when you're in the prison. But some people say the prison part takes too long. I can understand that. So I'm not saying it's absolutely the most amazing quest ever, but it's pretty good. It does a pretty good job. If all the quests were like that, Skyrim I'd have much more esteem for. And also there's multiple endings. You can side with the Forsworn, you can betray them. It's up to you. And I like that aspect. So for me, both these quests, Wolf Queen Awakens and the Forsworn Conspiracy, are kind of bottom of Talos tier. Okay, this quest I know you guys all love loads, and that's the Paarthurnax Dilemma. Everyone's favourite quest. It's where Delphine asks you to murder Paarthurnax for basically no reason, in order to progress with the blades. And it's one of the most pointless quests in Skyrim, to be completely honest with you. There's no defense can be made for it really, so it goes straight to the bottom. It's just one of those quests where you wonder what was going through their heads when they were developing Skyrim to think, you know what, players are going to want to kill Paarthurnax. They're really going to want to. I have no clue why they included this in the game, because he's got Paarthurnax. I don't know. The thing that's so annoying about Delphine is that it's almost as if I get the vibe that Bethesda wanted us to like her. They wanted us to like Delphine, but she's so insufferable. And they got it twisted. Paarthurnax is the one you want to keep alive, and Delphine's the one you want to kill. So it just kind of, it's a real spit in the face, I feel like, for most players and their sensibilities playing the game. So it goes to the bottom. This quest might be a bit more controversial. What do people think about the Civil War quest line? My feeling personally is that it deserves to be poor. Because the missions are so bland. You are just taking forts, and Skyrim's combat isn't great, so it just feels extremely bland. The only thing going for it is that I think as a context for the wider game, the Civil War is interesting as a concept and the reasons behind it, and that political crisis is really interesting. But in terms of the execution of the quest line is just so poor. It's so boring. They could have done it way better. They could have made it a lot more complicated, but they just settled with a quest line that was something that was doable, I think, is basically what they settled with. Something that was easy. You just take random forts. There's not really a lot to it. But there's such an interesting context, and they could have done so much more with it. So I think that for me it's poor because the context is good, the lore behind the whole Civil War is good, but the execution's just poor. Important, a lot of people are saying that's true, but repetitive, I think. So yeah. So we've got here a night to remember. So a night to remember is the quest you do, I think, for, is it Sanguine? The Daedric Prince of Debauchery. And this is one of the very few quests in the game that's actually funny. And I think it's important to take that into account because very few... Skyrim is quite a dour game most of the time. There's not that much comedy. But A Night to Remember is funny. And it's attempts by the developers to be funny. And so on that basis, I'm going to... I think either Pretty Good or Talos. What do you guys think? So... Blank Blank is saying A Night to Remember is Talos tier. Everyone's saying it's funny. It's only fun once. I mean, that's a good point. You can only really play it once. Best quest. Okay, we'll put that Talos tier. On the basis that there's very few funny quests in the game. And so playing A Night to Remember for the first time is one of the most entertaining things ever. But only for the first time. But it's unfair, I suppose, to judge it by the 5th time round rather than the first time. When you play A Night to Remember the first time, it's fun. So, the next one we have is... I don't think we've got too many left. Let me have a look. We've got 1, 2... I think we only have 2 quests left. So, okay. Firstly, let's do... So, this one's a bit of a joke. But the one where you retake... I think this is pretty good, but this is the quest where you retake the Reekling Hall with the Reekling in the Dragonborn DLC. The Chief of Thirskall. And so it's a quest where you are working with the... What are they called? The Thursks. Wait, no, the Reeklings, sorry. You're helping the Reeklings to... kill the Nords who are in Thirskall, and you're restoring them to power, basically. And it's one of the... I think it's... With A Night to Remember, it's one of the funnier quests. And so I think I'm going to put it on the pretty good tier. It's very unique. The Reeklings are funny. It's interesting. There's not a lot of oomph to it, and there's not a lot of gravitas, but it's funny. It's very likable. That's all I've got to really say about it. Likeable, fun quest. What do you guys think? Pomeranian Productions says, I like it very much, especially its end where you get to decide the fate of the Reeklings and the decision actually influences the Hall's opinion of you. That's true. There's also a lot of choice in this quest. So I think Pretty Good is a good place to have this one. So we've only got one more left. And I'm interested to see what you guys think of this. So this is the Legend of Red Eagle. So this quest starts when you read a book, I believe, and it informs you about Red Eagle. Who's this? And I suppose it kind of links with the Forsworn conspiracy, and it tells you about this Reachman kind of hero who's destined to come back to purge the Reach, I think, of the Nords, and to retake it for the Reachmen. And he kind of becomes this... He attracts a following among Reachmen as a kind of savior. And I think the thing I like most about this quest is the lore. The lore is behind it is so interesting. I actually made a video on it, I think, if you guys want to check it out. But it's one of those quests where I actually read the books, and I was on the various Wikipedias afterwards, searching about Red Eagle to kind of learn more about him, because it's one of those quests where the lore really is grounded in it. and the Forsworn in general, and their history. And so I really liked it. And so basically you have to raid, I think, a few kind of Forsworn redoubts, and eventually you end up fighting Red Eagle. And then you get his sword, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good quest. So it's kind of, it's one of those quests. Someone makes a good point. It's basically just a glorified fetch quest. It's a glorified fetch quest, and the dungeons aren't remarkable, but the lore and the story is really interesting. So for me, that's why I'm tempted to say pretty good rather than adequate. So yeah, it's kind of in the middle really, but I'm kind of, personally, I kind of want to put it at pretty good. Less of a vote. If you want it to be adequate, just type adequate. If you want to be pretty good, then type pretty good. I'll just insert an ad because it makes sense for the if people are going to type things in. Wilhelm says pretty good. So CB asks what the quest on top Alistair. So we've got Wolf Queen Awakens, we've got Forsworn Conspiracy, and A Night to Remember so far. So most people are saying pretty good, a few adequates. So I'm going to keep it on pretty good. And I think that's all the quests I've picked out. So, you know, to kind of explain my rationale, I didn't, there's dozens of quests in Skyrim. I couldn't include them all. So basically I included kind of a sample of lots of different quests. Some that I thought people were going to say are bad, some that were good, some that were more in the middle. And so this is just kind of a sample of the game's quests, and quests that I either detest or like or aren't too sure about. So not every quest in the game, basically. But this is the tier list. I think this is all of them. These images down the bottom are duplicates, so ignore those. But yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with this. If you guys want to do this yourself, then I can send you the link for the tier list maker. But yeah, thank you so much. This is going to become a video, I think, if I review the footage and I think it's good. I think I'm going to make this into a video. So yeah, you guys will more than likely, if you've been contributing, will end up in that video. But I'd just like to make a short kind of 5-minute video on this, and I thought it'd be more interesting if I did it through a stream with collaboration. So yeah, this isn't every quest in the game. There's more quests I suppose I could add. You know, someone talks about the Ethereum Wars and things like that, but I thought, you know, I didn't want this to be too long, because if I ranked every quest in the game, we would be here for about a week. So I just selected what I thought was a good sample size of kind of Skyrim in general. What about the droid attack on the Wookiees? What indeed? It's a question that baffles me even to this day. But the Ethereum Wars I quite liked, just for the record. I did quite like that quest. But yeah, thank you all so much. I guess that's kind of the end. How do I save this? Can I save this as a PDF? Download the image. There we go. Could do rankings of mods next, or we could do rankings of NPCs as well. That'd be cool. So Jacob, you just joined. So basically, I just finished, but I spent the kind of last, how long have we been streaming? Like an hour? Holy shit, like an hour. So the last hour we've just been ranking different quests in Skyrim, and I'm gonna make this the subject of a video, like a really short video, but kind of I thought it'd be more interesting if I did it collaboratively on a stream. So I'm gonna try and edit it, and if it's good and if I like the product, then I'll upload a video about it probably tomorrow, because I don't think it'll take me too long to edit. But yeah, thank you all so much for joining. Sorry for those who just joined and didn't get to participate, but as I said, I'll produce a video, you can watch it back, and you can actually do this yourself. I'll send you guys the link. If I can. So I've downloaded the image, so I've got the image. So does this link just work for anyone? So there you go. I don't know if that's the right link, but there you go. But yeah, thank you all so much, guys, for joining. And watch out for a video, because or tomorrow, I'll hopefully, if it works out well and all the recording's gone well and I think it's good enough, I'll turn this into a video, and you guys might be in it. So thank you all so much, and I'll see you guys in the next one.